Chapter 340, Lay's Contribution. The ball would run until midnight. Halfway through, some guests chose to step outside for a breather. To give the young people a pleasant place to stroll, Dumbledore had magically created a small, exquisite garden beside the castle's main entrance. It was full of blooming rose bushes and winding paths. Lanterns were hung with flourish, and a few large stone statues and fountains dotted the grounds. It was, without question, the most romantic spot for couples. Karkaroff and Snape, however, were not there for romance. After Moody followed Karkaroff out into the garden, he slipped a disillusionment charm over himself and melted into the shadows. The night was dark and the lighting sparse. Almost no one could have seen him. Years of hunting dark wizards had taught him to trust his instincts. Karkaroff's behavior was unnervingly suspicious. There were few people in the garden. Moody trailed Karkaroff and nearly bumped a passing student, but the other person didn't notice the invisible man inches away. To Moody's surprise, a sharp-eyed little creature saw through the disguise. Perched atop a statue, a large white thunderbird cocked its head and fixed its keen eyes on him. Moody recognized it, Vincent's thunderbird, called Lay. The bird didn't cry or give alarm, it simply watched. "Little fellow," Moody muttered under his breath, "don't let anything unexpected happen." Karkaroff and Snape had paused in a corner to speak. Moody held his breath and edged closer. His wooden leg made a faint sound against the cobbles, but a nearby fountain masked it. Karkaroff's voice came out low and frayed. "He's coming soon. Severus, you feel it too, don't you? It's stronger tonight. He gave me one chance." Moody took a few more steps to catch the rest. Snape's face was charcoal in the dim light. "Calm down, Igor. You're being paranoid. I just came to tell you. We have to." Before Karkaroff could finish, Snape whipped his wand and aimed it at a nearby bush. A spell flashed, and several students fell out of the shrubbery in a panicked heap. Whatever the two were saying could not continue. 10 points from Ravenclaw," Snape snapped. "And 10 from Gryffindor, too." The students who'd tumbled from the bushes were terrified. Their leader was Colin Creevey, still clutching his camera. They'd only come looking for excitement. A Durmstrang head and a professor from Hogwarts arguing in the garden was rare enough. With points deducted, the caught students slowed, beaten into silence. Moody's annoyance flared. He'd been so close to hearing something useful. The sudden commotion, however, was like a stone thrown into still water. Students across the garden turned toward the disturbance. A few even walked right toward the corner to see what had happened. Moody wasn't hiding in the bushes, but in a shadow by the path. A student moving in his direction tripped on a step and brushed his shoulder. Moody reacted quickly. When the student thought he'd hit something, he moved and hid behind a statue. As more people gathered, Snape's expression darkened. "Everyone, immediately, leave here," he ordered, cold and sharp. "Unless someone else wants to lose points." Most students obeyed, but then something unexpected happened. Moody felt the statue beside him tremble. He looked up to see the white thunderbird plunge from above, lay like a silver streak in moonlight. The bird swooped down and, with a flash of talons, ripped Karkaroff's sleeve. There was a sound of tearing fabric and a terrified cry from Karkaroff. He clutched his left arm at once, but it was too late. Under the moonlight, a hideous mark was revealed on his flesh, a writhing, serpentine pattern that glowed a sickly dark red, as if seared on. Students who hadn't yet left the garden gasped. A few screamed outright. "Merlin, it's his mark," someone cried. "What is that?" a younger student asked, bewildered. Colin, unsure what it meant, but seeing everyone's shock, jabbed his camera shutter several times. Snape acted instantly. He flicked his wand and erected a barrier that isolated Karkaroff from the crowd. "Everyone, leave, now!" he barked. Moody's magical eye nearly popped out of its socket. He dispelled his disillusionment charm, his wooden leg thunking onto the cobbles as he stepped forward. "Don't move, everyone," he shouted. Faced with the fearsome Professor Snape and the sudden appearance of the former Auror, the students hesitated, uncertain whose order to follow. The scene was unraveling fast. Lai gave a sharp cry and vanished back into the darkness. At that moment, in the Great Hall, Vincent was talking dinner with Dumbledore when the Thunderbird's warning call reached his ears. "There might be trouble, Professor Dumbledore," he said gravely. Within 3 minutes, Vincent and Dumbledore arrived at the garden. Moody, Karkaroff, and Snape were locked in a tense standoff. Moody planted his wooden leg in the path's cracks and held his wand straight at Karkaroff, like an old beast ready to spring. Karkaroff was ashen. Sweat streamed down his face as he clutched the arm where the dark mark still pulsed. Snape stood between them, face like stone. Dumbledore and Vincent's eyes fell immediately on Karkaroff's exposed arm. Though the Durmstrang head tried to cover it, the red-black glow remained ominous in the night. "Alastair," Dumbledore said quietly, breaking the deadlock, "will you tell me what happened here?" Moody's gaze never left Karkaroff. He answered flatly, "It's obvious. 2 Death Eaters skulking around, plotting something, preparing to do their master a favor." Chapter 342, Karkaroff Exposed. Moody's voice cut through the dark trees and carried to everyone gathered. A cold glint flashed in Dumbledore's eyes as he gripped his wand and stepped forward, his robes whispering in the night breeze. "Igor, I think we need an explanation." Karkaroff stumbled back, his spine hitting a cold stone statue. His pupils constricted, and he began to stammer. "Albus, I'm not with you-know-who anymore. I don't know what happened." Moody sneered and closed the distance in a single step, cutting him off. "Save it, Karkaroff. Did you really think I didn't hear you? He gave me another chance. Those were your exact words. You followed me." Karkaroff's face drained of color. Sweat soaked his collar. Snape raised his wand, his expression taut. "Moody, you'd better be careful what you're accusing him of," he said sharply. "Accusing?" Moody's wand tip flashed. "I saw the 2 of you conspiring with my own eyes. Snape, doesn't your dark mark burn as well? Should we check your left arm, too?" Dumbledore's gaze sharpened. He raised a hand for silence, then gave Vincent a quick, meaningful nod. Vincent understood and immediately turned to the students. "Back to the Great Hall. Now!" The students dispersed reluctantly, casting anxious glances back as if afraid to miss something earth-shattering. Once they were gone and the grounds were clear, Dumbledore's attention swung between Snape and Karkaroff. "A burning dark mark doesn't prove everything," he said calmly but with unmistakable authority. "We need a more professional method of questioning." "How about Veritaserum?" Vincent offered at the right moment. "Professor Snape must have some extra." "Possessing Veritaserum without authorization is illegal," Snape replied coldly. Vincent merely shrugged. He knew better than to believe Snape kept no contraband. Moody's lips twisted into a satisfied smile. "Coincidentally, I happen to have a bottle right here." He produced a small, shimmering silver phial from his inner pocket. Vincent gave him a silent thumbs up. As a former Auror, Moody was always prepared, perhaps overly so, Vincent thought. Carrying Veritaserum about was extreme even for an ex-Auror. Karkaroff watched Moody approach with the feel and panicked. "No, you can't. This is illegal, Albus. Stop him." Dumbledore, however, seemed suddenly fascinated by the moon, tilting his head back and stroking his silver beard as if he hadn't heard. Karkaroff's desperation grew. He glanced at Snape, but the potions master stood impassive, saying nothing. With no other options, Karkaroff made a break for it. "You have no right. I'm leaving." He had barely taken 2 steps when a silver-white shape dropped down like lightning. Lay spread massive wings and landed squarely on the stone path, blocking him. The Thunderbird raised its head, eyes flashing with a dangerous light, feathers bristling along its neck, and the entire way forward was sealed. "Get out of the way, you damned beast!" Karkaroff shrieked, sparks leaping from his wand. Vincent would not allow anyone to harm Lai. "Expelliarmus!" he barked. Karkaroff's wand flew from his hand and arced through the air before Lai caught it in its beak. The color drained from Karkaroff's face. He crumpled to the ground. Moody crossed to him, grabbed him by the collar, and forced the phial between his teeth. He tipped it back and poured. "Drink," he ordered, voice hoarse and fierce. Vincent watched, thinking Moody had used far too much. A few drops would usually suffice. This dosage would likely keep Karkaroff under the potion's influence for hours. The silver liquid trickled from the corners of Karkaroff's mouth as he coughed. His eyes went glassy and his facial muscles slackened. Dumbledore turned away from the moon and at last looked fully at Karkaroff. Moody released his hold and stepped back. "Karkaroff," he said, "tell us the truth. What task did Lord Voldemort give you?" Karkaroff's voice was flat and mechanical. to keep watch over the students and professors of Durmstrang and to ensure Harry Potter would be entered into the Triwizard Tournament. Vincent felt little surprise. He had long suspected Karkaroff of tampering with the Goblet of Fire to secure Harry's entry. That Voldemort had an eye on Durmstrang's students, however, was a darker development, reasonable, perhaps, since they made promising recruits for his forces. Dumbledore's face remained composed, revealing nothing. "How did Lord Voldemort contact you, and why did you obey?" Karkaroff answered, "Through the Dark Mark. The Master hates traitors, but he offered me a chance. If I completed the task, I would be forgiven." Moody spat. "Traitor." "One more question," Dumbledore said. "What is Lord Voldemort's current state?" "The Master, he is now. Karkaroff's face suddenly contorted. An odd gurgling sound rose in his throat. The dark mark on his forearm flared, growing painfully bright. Vincent realized that Voldemort was blocking him from speaking further. In the next instant, Karkaroff convulsed violently. His eyes rolled back, whites showing, foam bubbling at his lips. And almost as suddenly as it began, his body went limp and utterly still. Chapter 343. Colin is puzzled when Karkaroff went still. Everyone nearby was momentarily stunned. Vincent darted forward and pressed 2 fingers lightly to the Durmstrang headmaster's nose. "He's breathing," he said, frowning. "Very faint. I can't tell what sort of dark arts did this, but it looks like Lord Voldemort's handiwork. Some kind of curse, perhaps." Dumbledore sighed. "I didn't expect it to be Karkaroff. I suspected it ages ago," Moody growled. "A cowardly traitor is never to be trusted." He turned his sharp gaze to Snape, who had been standing silent. "There's another person who needs explaining. Snape, anything to say for yourself?" Before Dumbledore could intervene, Snape spoke in his usual flat tone. "It has nothing to do with me." "Oh, really?" Moody stalked closer and fixed him with a hard stare. "Roll up your sleeve. Let's see your left arm. Prove that Voldemort hasn't touched you." "That won't prove anything," Snape said, but he rolled up his sleeve. Under the moonlight, his skin was so pale it seemed translucent. Everyone held their breath. There was a dark mark on his arm, but it was blurred and faded, more like an old scar than a fresh brand. "Satisfied?" Snape's voice sounded as if it had been dipped in vinegar. Moody peered at the mark, as if he could extract secrets from it by glare alone. Finally, he snorted. Dumbledore's voice was gentle. "Snapey is to be trusted, Alastor, just as I trust you." Moody didn't look convinced. "I'll be watching you, Death Eater," he said. "Every move, every word. Don't think you can pull anything past me." Snape showed no visible reaction. Dumbledore looked resigned. He knew Moody trusted only his own instincts, and that stubbornness had only hardened with the years. "How tedious," Snape muttered. "It won't change anything, and—" "Professor Vincent." Vincent cut him off. "We need to get Karkaroff to Madame Pomfrey. His breathing is nearly gone. I hope he's still alive." They all turned to where Karkaroff lay. Foam had darkened at the corners of his mouth, and his breathing was shallow. He was in a critical state. About 5 minutes later, he was carried to the hospital wing. When Madame Pomfrey arrived, she was still in her dress and flushed, likely from having had some wine, but the color drained from her face at the sight of him. "Merlin's beard," she cried, soberness snapping into place. She checked his pulse, opened his eyes and peered into his mouth, then stared at the dark mark on his arm. Under the hospital wing lights, the mark looked burnt and dim. "I don't know what's been done to him," Pomfrey said, her expression grave. "It may be a curse or something rarer and darker." Dumbledore nodded. Pomfrey's assessment matched his own. "I'm not skilled at treating curse-inflicted injuries," she continued. "I can keep him alive here for a while, but this is far from a minor accident. He should be sent to St. Mungo's. They're the best equipped to handle this." "I'll arrange it," Dumbledore said. Then he turned to Vincent. "Please contact Mr. Bagman and Percy. The Triwizard Tournament will need some adjustments." Vincent nodded and hurried off to find them. Back in the Great Hall, the Christmas ball went on. Colin Creevey stood in a corner, fussing with his camera. He'd managed to upgrade it so it could take moving photographs now. Because the ball was officially for 4th years and above, most younger students had gone home, and as one of the few 3rd years remaining, Colin had permission from Professor McGonagall to be there and take pictures of Harry. Earlier, while he'd gone out to the gardens for some air, he'd accidentally caught Karkaroff in a photograph. torn cuff, terrified expression, a twitching panic, and a curious glowing pattern on his arm. As a Muggle-born wizard, Colin had no idea what the pattern meant. He only knew that anyone who saw the picture would gasp. He had asked a few people about it, but all of them had reacted with fear and refused to explain. So Colin planned to show the photo to the Durmstrang students. Surely they'd know. Professor McGonagall's voice interrupted his thoughts. "Mr. Creevey, how are the photos?" Her gaze landed on the image in his hand. "Wait, what is that?" Colin handed it over. Professor McGonagall looked at the moving photograph and her face hardened. "Come with me." She led him out of the Great Hall and stopped in a corner of the entrance hall. "Where did you take this?" she asked gravely. "And where is Karkaroff now?" Colin's heart hammered. He stammered. "In the garden. Headmaster Dumbledore, Professor Wisen, and Professor Moody were there." Wisen returned from outside at that moment. McGonagall hurried to him. "Professor Wisen, about Karkaroff." "Go to the hospital wing," Wisen said without missing a beat. He already knew what she meant. "Dumbledore is there and will explain. I need to find Mr. Bagman." McGonagall hurried back into the hall. Wisen went to locate Bagman. Colin was left standing alone, a little dazed. He blinked at the spot where they'd gone and felt suddenly small and excluded. Who would tell him what that mark meant? Why did everyone act as if disaster were just around the corner? And why hadn't Professor McGonagall given his photograph back? He tried to be reassured by the fact that he had taken several copies. He still had more pictures tucked away. Chapter 3 and 44, Amnesia. When Professor Wisen entered the Great Hall, he scanned the crowd and quickly spotted Ludo Bagman, wedged between Fred and George, one twin on each side, wearing a strained smile. Percy stood nearby, hesitating as if unsure whether to step in. As Wisen approached, Bagman's voice carried across the noise. "Ah, you certainly won, boys, and I've already paid you enough galleons, haven't I? What reason have you to bother me further?" "Those were goblin coins," Fred began. Before he could finish, Bagman noticed Professor Wisen and brightened. "Professor Wisen, over here," he called, ignoring the twins as he waved exaggeratedly. "There's something important I must discuss with you about Harry Potter." Wisen, surprised at how familiar he'd grown with Bagman, stepped forward. "We don't have time for much chat, Mr. Bagman. Professor Dumbledore is waiting in the hospital wing. There's been a small incident you should know about." Bagman breathed a sigh of relief. He'd been looking for any excuse to get rid of the twins. "Ah, of course," he said, slipping past Fred and George with a smile. "I'll go at once." Fred and George shot daggers at him. "You two," Wisen said to them, "you'll have to find another time for your quarrel. This is urgent." The twins exchanged a look that said they weren't giving up, but Vincent's expression left no room for argument. They relented. "Fine, Professor," George said with a light shrug and a glint of mischief in his eyes. "We have plenty of time." Bagman's smile froze. He knew all too well these red-headed twins could be more than a pack of goblin debt collectors. At least the goblins didn't show up at Hogwarts. "Good," Wisen said, then turned to Percy. "You come with us, Percy." Percy set down his drink at the sound of his name. At that moment, Harry, followed by Parvati, pushed through the crowd. Harry looked pale, one hand pressed to his temple, his brow furrowed. Parvati's face was full of worry. "Professor," Harry said, "my scar hurt horribly about half an hour ago." Vincent's eyes narrowed. "And now?" "It was only for a moment," Harry replied. "You told me to report if my scar gave me trouble again." Vincent nodded. A suspicion had taken shape. If Karkaroff had been affected by the dark mark earlier, Harry might well have felt a twinge. "Come with us, Harry," he said. A short time later, the hospital wing was crowded. Dumbledore, Wisen, McGonagall, Bagman, and others stood clustered around Karkaroff's bed. To everyone's surprise, Karkaroff had come round while Wisen was speaking with the others, but his eyes were utterly blank. He looked around in confusion until his gaze landed on Dumbledore. "Where is this? Who are you?" he asked in a hoarse, bewildered voice. "His brain has sustained some damage," Madame Pomfrey said uncertainly. "A certain memory was erased, and that seems to have affected other memories as well. I can't tell how much he'll remember." Professor McGonagall leaned forward and spoke slowly and clearly. "Do you remember who you are?" Karkaroff's vacant stare turned to her. He lifted his hand and studied his withered fingers as if they were unfamiliar objects. He seemed unable to place himself. "That's not good," Bagman said, trying for levity but sounding oddly solemn. "My 3-year-old niece can say her own name." "Can his memory be restored?" Vincent asked. "It's very difficult," Madame Pomfrey replied. "Even if some memories can be recovered, it won't be everything." Vincent felt the weight of it sink in. Karkaroff was, at least for now, gone to them. Percy, anxious, asked, "Should the Triwizard tournament be suspended?" "Don't panic, Percy," Bagman said in a surprisingly measured tone. "It's one less headmaster, but our champions are unharmed. This won't affect the competition." Bagman's mind had other reasons to insist on maintaining the tournament. No tournament meant no spectacle, and no spectacle meant fewer chances to sort out his debts. Percy, however, felt unsettled. This was not merely protocol. He needed to inform Barty Crouch at once. As an agent, he had to defer significant decisions to him. Early the next morning, Karkaroff was transferred to St. Mungo's Hospital for magical maladies and injuries. Though there had been a commotion outside, most students had enjoyed the rest of their evening. A few had seen the disturbance in the grounds, and by the next morning rumors had suffused the school, each more elaborate than the last. Some said Moody and Karkaroff had come to blows, and Moody's magical eye had fired a beam that felled Karkaroff. Others whispered about an improper liaison between Karkaroff and Professor Snape, supposedly interrupted by Moody. The most widely told tale, though, was that Karkaroff was a Death Eater on a secret mission from Lord Voldemort, and that Moody had arrested him. At first, the students were skeptical. Durmstrang's endorsement of defensive and dark studies didn't make it likely that their headmaster was a secret agent for Voldemort. Even the Durmstrang students were incredulous. But when their headmaster simply vanished, panic spread all the same. That evening, Professor Vincent was in his office, marking homework assigned for the Christmas holidays. Someone, surprisingly, had already completed every piece of work he'd given. That student was Hermione. Her assignment, an observational report on the 4 dragons used in the Triwizard Tournament's first task, was exemplary. She'd analyzed each dragon's strengths and weaknesses and even proposed methods for subduing them. Vincent had to admit it was a model piece of work. A knock sounded on his office door. "Come in." 345. Undercurrent Vincent raised an eyebrow when he saw who was standing in his office doorway. He hadn't expected Victor Krum. "Well, this is a surprise," Vincent said, setting down his quill. "Can I help you, Mr. Krum?" Krum walked in, hesitated, then asked, "Professor Vincent, do you know where Principal Karkaroff is? And are the rumors true?" Vincent paused, surprised. "Didn't Professor Dumbledore tell you?" Krum shook his head. "I went to see Professor Dumbledore, but—" He looked embarrassed. "No one told me you needed a password to get into the headmaster's office." Vincent blinked. Of course, Krum had gone to Dumbledore first. He hadn't expected the boy to know that the password to Dumbledore's office changed and was often something as trivial as a dessert name. It was awkward enough that their own principal was missing. That one of the student representatives was still unaware made it worse. Krum had other reasons for coming to him. Rumors pointed to Vincent. He was one of the few professors Krum had spoken with, and Hermione had spoken highly of him. Vincent waved a hand, summoned an armchair, and invited Krum to sit. Then he told him everything, plainly and without omission. "You're saying Principal Karkaroff tried to frame Harry, was discovered by Professor Moody, and then, by Lord Voldemort's curse, was sent to St. Mungo's, his life hanging in the balance." Krum found it hard to believe. "That's pretty much it," Vincent said. It was admittedly an unbelievable chain of events. When Vincent confirmed the details, Krum's face darkened, his brows knit. He had known Karkaroff was once a Death Eater, but he'd thought the man had abandoned that past. Krum had never liked his principal. He felt contempt for the Dark Lord and his followers, above all for the first-generation Death Eaters. That Karkaroff might still be working for Voldemort was a humiliation to Durmstrang and something that would reflect badly on its students. Imagine a school's headmaster revealed as a servant of Voldemort. How would others see the school? "I think Mr. Bagman will make an announcement in a few days," Vincent added. "After that, the Triwizard Tournament." "It won't be cancelled," Krum said, nodding. He understood. "Then, can I tell others about this?" "That's up to you, Mr. Krum," Vincent replied with a small smile. "I don't object. It's only a matter of time, anyway." Snow began to fall over Hogwarts the next morning. Bagman returned from St. Mungo's and told Vincent that Karkaroff was much the same as when they'd last seen him. The only improvement was that he seemed able, intermittently, to remember his name, though he kept pronouncing it as Igor Karagov. The healers suggested this might be a childhood habit. His memory was slowly being restored, but full recovery could take an eternity. The doctors at St. Mungo's found his case tricky. Similar symptoms had been seen after memory charms, but Karkaroff was under some kind of curse, not a charm. For now, there were no other changes. Percy reported the matter to Barty Crouch and received a terse reply: proceed with the Triwizard Tournament as planned. Barty Crouch himself did not come to Hogwarts. Percy, temporarily filling Crouch's role, walked a little taller. He had finally caught the notice of his superior. Barty Crouch had even managed to get his name right: Percy Weasley, not merely Weasley. With one principal absent, Durmstrang's students were affected. Dumbledore sent a letter to Durmstrang, and they replied that they wanted Krum to stay and help look after their students during the tournament. It became clear that Karkaroff was not well regarded at his own school. Moody had also informed his former Auror colleagues, and the Aurors were deeply concerned. Rufus Scrimger, head of the Ministry of Magic's Auror office, personally came to see Dumbledore and learn more. In the wider wizarding world, undercurrents were stirring. By early January, talk of Karkaroff among the students had quieted, but then an event reignited the matter. Photographs of Karkaroff, clutching the dark mark on his arm, began circulating through Hogwarts. Rumor had it they originated with third-year students. Now there was proof. The man really had the dark mark. Soon the pictures spread beyond the school. One Saturday morning, Colin Creevey sat in the Great Hall, happily eating. He had finally grasped what the mark on Karkaroff's arm meant: the dark mark, the sign that had struck fear through the wizarding world. He didn't understand all the terror attached to Voldemort, but he knew that a Death Eater was a dangerous thing. A brown owl hovered above and dropped a package at Colin's table. It was a copy of the Daily Prophet, ordered by his roommate. He unfolded it casually. A large red headline shocked him: Igor Karkaroff, serving in Lord Voldemort's resurrection, now arrested by Aurors. Below were several photos. Colin nearly choked on his pumpkin juice. He stared at one in particular. It was the photograph he'd taken in the garden. Karkaroff looked terrified. The dark mark on his arm was blurred, but visible enough. Beside it was a close-up of Karkaroff in a St. Mungo's bed, eyes vacant and drool at the corner of his mouth. The article, by Rita Skeeter, summarized that Karkaroff had been arrested, had temporarily lost his memory, and was now at St. Mungo's. Colin folded the paper tidily and set it aside, then went back to his meat pie. What did any of it have to do with him? He was just a child studying at Hogwarts. 346. The debate about Krum, Bart, and Wicca. What Colin didn't know was that Rita Skeeter's piece on Karkaroff had set the wizarding world alight. Skeeter's article insisted the former Death Eater was plotting to bring Voldemort back. Although much of it was speculation, the photograph was real enough: the dark mark glowing on Karkaroff's arm. After what had happened at the Quidditch World Cup, people needed little prompting to believe the worst. Even Fudge's public denials couldn't put the story back in its bottle. In the Gryffindor common room, the fire crackled. Harry had read the article. He wasn't surprised. He'd been involved that day, and Skeeter had mentioned him by name. The piece claimed that Karkaroff had entered Hogwarts suspected of trying to harm the Savior, Harry Potter, to make sure his master would not be defeated again should he return. It even quoted Harry as saying he couldn't defeat Voldemort. When Harry saw the photograph of the dark mark, a faint pain shimmered across his scar, probably just nerves. "What do you think, Ron, about Karkaroff?" Harry asked. Ron, absorbed in a game of wizard's chess, barely looked up. "Whatever," he said dismissively. Harry watched him with some helplessness. Ron hadn't been like this before. Harry knew why. Ron was still miffed, bordering on resentful, that Hermione had danced with Victor Krum at the Yule Ball. Harry personally hadn't seen anything to dislike in Krum. From his first impression, Victor hadn't been a bad sort. He was an excellent Quidditch player. But Ron's mood was obvious. "Didn't you admire Krum before?" Harry sighed. Ron paused with his finger hovering above a chess piece, then shook his head. "That's different." Hermione came rushing over, holding a copy of the paper. "Did you two see this?" she demanded, slamming it on the table and pointing at Skeeter's article. "We all saw it," Harry said. "Calm down, Hermione." Hermione sat down beside him, pale with worry. "I can't believe it. Karkaroff wants to harm you, doesn't he? He put your name in the Goblet of Fire on purpose." "He did," Harry said. "But I don't mind being in the tournament, even though I'm not supposed to be." "That's not the point." Hermione's face hardened. "Karkaroff put you in for a reason. He wants you dead. He would use the tournament tasks to kill you." "I know," Harry said, trying to sound more confident than he felt. "But he was wrong about the dragon. That couldn't get me." "Who would have thought a fourth year could handle a dragon alone?" Hermione sighed. "But what about the later tasks? He could have tampered with those as well." "I'll be careful," Harry promised. Hermione turned to Ron, who still hadn't spoken. Ron seemed distant, twisting the night piece until it creaked. "Maybe you should talk to Crumb," he said finally. "He must know more about Karkaroff than we do." Hermione frowned at the tone in Ron's voice. "Are you angry?" Ron looked up, low and tight. "Just be careful of Crumb, Hermione. Karkaroff's the sort of man who attracts bad people. His students at Durmstrang aren't exactly saints." Hermione's mouth dropped open. "What are you talking about? Victor and Karkaroff are completely different." "Are they?" Ron sneered, the knight nearly slipping from his hand. "Durmstrang teaches the dark arts. Crumb's their star pupil. Do you honestly expect him to be all sugar and sunshine?" "How can you say that?" Hermione's voice rose, drawing several younger students' attention. "From everything I've seen, Victor's honest and kind," Ron scoffed. "Oh? You know him well, then? Has he ever used dark magic in front of you?" Durmstrang students can't hide what they learn forever. The conversation was getting heated. Harry stepped in. "I won't pretend Crumb couldn't have faults, but I don't think he's a bad person." Hermione turned to Harry, eyes wide. "See?" Ron shrugged and stood. "Fine, we'll see." He left the common room with a curt, "Let's wait and see." Hermione watched his retreating back, unsettled. 10 seconds later, she huffed, "Ron is being unreasonable." "He's been in a foul mood these past few days," Harry said. "Why?" Hermione asked. "Who knows?" Harry shrugged. "Maybe he just hates Crumb." By mid-January, lessons were back in full swing. The second task of the Triwizard Tournament was still over a month away. Morning found Vincent under the humping willow at the edge of the Forbidden Forest. In front of him, two brown figures about Hagrid's height moved clumsily. Up close, they looked like humanoid trees. Bart and Wicca. They were practicing with a quaffle, each throw awkward and stiff. Wicca especially, since it had only recently gained the ability to transform. Wicca had been the rowan tree that had always stood beside Bart. After growing for years, it had acquired the same shifting power. Bart, too, had advanced. He hadn't learned any new spells, but he could now leave the forest for short stretches. Their throws were getting steadier. Wicca launched the quaffle high into the air. Bart sprang up, his rough, bark-covered arms stretched to the limit. Crunch. The quaffle shattered and Bart's leather fragments sifted through the gaps between his fingers. Vincent stroked his chin, watching. Perhaps some strength control should be added to their special training, he thought. Chapter 3 and 46, 2 trees and 2 people. Name Wicca species, Rowan tree level 3, trait, guardian. Although Wicca hadn't yet mastered language, he followed orders perfectly. In Bart's eyes, Wicca was his loyal little brother. According to the Tree of Wisdom's reckoning, it was a leader and guardian relationship. A guardian obeyed the leader without question. It showed. Bart could tell Wicca to stick his head in the dirt, and Wicca would do it. "Oh, what is that?" A familiar voice called out. "Good morning, Professor Sprout," Professor Vincent answered as Professor Sprout turned, surprised. She had come to spread fertilizer for the homping willow, which tended to get sluggish in winter, but her attention was instantly captured by Bart, stretching his limbs, and Wicca, still stuck upside down in the soil. "What are these two? I've never seen trees like them. They almost look like people." "Bart, Wicca," Professor Vincent called. Bart immediately shook his branches and scampered over on his roots. Wicca was a beat slower. He'd only just pulled himself free, a few clumps of earth still clinging to his crown. "This is Bart, a beech tree. That's Wicca, a rowan," Professor Vincent explained. "I found them in the Forbidden Forest, and they've changed a bit." Professor Sprout inspected them carefully and then smiled. Reaching for her wand, she made a small pouch fly from her belt. It landed on the ground and swelled into a sack half a person's height. She patted the bulging sack. "This is my special fertilizer, unicorn hair, moonstone powder, and bubble pod to help it along. Big fellow, would you like some?" Professor Vincent didn't ask how those ingredients became fertilizer, but Bart's attention was fixed the moment she opened the sack. He found it irresistibly attractive. "Professor Sprout is a friend," Vincent reminded him. Only with Professor Vincent's permission did Bart step forward and probe the sack with his roots, then settle into a look of pure contentment. He seemed slightly embarrassed to accept from someone he didn't know well. "Don't get the wrong idea," Bart added, scratching the back of his head in a human-like gesture. "I don't need this, but Wika does." Wika blinked, puzzled. Professor Vincent gestured, indicating she understood. Professor Sprout relaxed at Bart's acceptance and, a little surprised that he could speak and form his own thoughts, explained, "This blend is newly developed. I made it for the homping willow. It needs extra nutrients in winter to stay healthy. I suppose I'll have to make more now." "Thank you for your kindness, Professor Sprout," Vincent said. Professor Sprout soon left. She still had morning classes to teach. Professor Vincent, meanwhile, still had to test Bart and Wika's limits, at least to see how far Bart would wander from the forbidden forest. He led the two trees west. They passed Hagrid's hut and crossed a large open field before arriving at the Quidditch pitch. With the Triwizard Tournament underway this term, there were no matches or training, and the pitch was deserted, until two dark figures streaked across the sky at high speed. The Flyers seemed to notice the sudden presence in the field and circled closer. "Harry? Crumb?" Professor Vincent raised an eyebrow in surprise. It was an unusual pairing. Harry and Victor Crumb dropped from their firebolts and landed. Harry, flushed and sweating from exertion, wiped his forehead. "Good morning, Professor Vincent," he panted. "I was practicing flying with Victor." "And the result?" Vincent asked. Harry sighed. "He's amazing. I was completely beaten." That wasn't surprising. Even a talented school player was no match for a professional. Vincent regarded Crumb with a nod. Crumb smiled and inclined his head in greeting. He hadn't taken many invitations to fly. He'd accepted this one because he wanted to see more of Harry Potter. Harry's handling of the dragon in the first Triwizard task had impressed him. Subduing a dragon single-handedly was no small feat. Now it seemed Harry's flying was also exceptional. Anyone could see he had a bright future ahead. By then, Bart and Wika had arrived, Wika trailing behind. "Oh, Master, slow down. Bart can't keep up," Wika called. Bart raced up to Professor Vincent, waving his branches, while Wika followed at a more sedate pace. "Bart?" Harry exclaimed. He hadn't seen Bart in ages. Bart hesitated, then brightened. "Harry Potter," he announced. Harry prepared to correct the pronunciation, but before he could, Bart reached out and patted him on the head with a wooden hand. The gesture nearly knocked Harry off balance. He stumbled to his knees, and Crumb caught him. "What is that thing?" Crumb asked, curiosity and a bit of seriousness in his tone. "Bart is not a thing," Bart replied earnestly. "Don't be frightened, Victor," Harry said, introducing him. "That's Bart, a beech tree. He's very friendly." It seemed Vincent hadn't expected such familiarity. Harry and Crumb's relationship had clearly grown closer. "Harry's right," Vincent said. "Bart and Wika are from the Forbidden Forest. They won't attack under normal circumstances." "Just call me Victor," Crumb replied, nodding, then leaned in to examine Bart and Wika more closely. "We've never had trees that can talk and walk here. It's incredible." "We didn't, no," Vincent agreed. "Bart and Wika are exceptions." Crumb spent a pleasant while entertaining and being entertained by the two trees, enjoying the novelty of their company. Chapter 347, Sensitive. On an early February morning, Ron sat at the great hall table, eating breakfast as usual, though he hadn't felt like himself all through January. He was irritable, as if trapped in a jar. The duel he had arranged with Malfoy hung over him like the sword of Damocles, and what made him angrier still was that Harry and Hermione had actually become friendly with that blasted Crumb. They'd even started calling each other by their first names. Ron couldn't explain it. He simply disliked Crumb. On top of that, he kept feeling abandoned. He knew it was only his imagination. Harry still helped him practice spells in his spare time for the duel, and Hermione, well, best not to think about Hermione. He glanced across the table. Hermione was there, but neither of them wanted to speak. If Harry were around to mediate, the atmosphere wouldn't be so tense, but Harry had gone out early that morning. For a moment, Ron didn't know what to say. Harry, meanwhile, was in Professor Vincent's office, discussing the Triwizard Tournament. There were a little over 10 days left. "So, are you ready for the second task?" Vincent asked. Harry lifted his teacup, took a sip, and said, "Roughly, from the hint in that song, it seems we'll need to retrieve something that's being held underwater." "It sounds like you're already confident," Vincent observed, leaning back and smiling at Harry's calmness. "Not exactly." Harry shook his head, leaving a damp ring on the desk with his cup. "Nothing's certain until the last moment, but I've done what I can." "You said it was a merperson's song, and Hermione told me a colony of merpeople lives at the bottom of the Black Lake," Vincent prompted. "Yes." Harry spread his hands. "I went looking for them. They're there, but I don't understand their language. I found a book on Murmish in the library, but who would actually learn Murmish? It's dreadfully dull." Vincent made a wry gesture that suggested Dumbledore might have arranged such a drab book. "So how did you get down to the lake?" "A bubblehead charm did it," Harry replied. "You have to cast it strong enough. When I reached the bottom, the charm broke, and the giant squid hauled me to shore. It's a very obliging squid." Vincent nodded, satisfied. Harry seemed prepared enough for the task, and Cedric, too, showed solid skill. With the hints Vincent had given, there shouldn't be much to worry about unless the organizers changed the task last minute, which was unlikely. After Harry left, a sharp knock sounded at Vincent's window. An owl dropped an envelope and flapped away so quickly Vincent barely saw it. The letter landed neatly on his desk. He opened it, puzzled at the unusual visit, and skimmed its contents. With a snap of his fingers, a small flame appeared and consumed the paper until nothing remained. "Hopeless," he muttered. The letter had been from Fudge, asking Vincent to act as a witness for Karkaroff, to publicly claim Karkaroff was merely insane and that other accusations were rumor. Vincent thought it pointless and didn't much fancy dealing with Fudge. With Voldemort's return, Fudge's position looked untenable. The plea seemed desperate. Another knock came at the window. This time, a pair of sharp eyes peered in. "Lay?" Vincent said, opening the sash. Lay, an owl, chirped and bobbed its head toward its crown. Vincent leaned out and saw what it meant. Perched on Lay's head was a tiny bundle of red, no, not fur, but the newly reborn phoenix Fawkes, looking small and resplendent. Lay and Fawkes chirped a few more times, as if urging Vincent to go to the headmaster's office. It took Vincent less than 3 minutes to reach the office door. "Professor Dumbledore, you called for me," he began, entering, and then stopped. Dumbledore stood beside the Pensieve, silver threads of memory drifting from his temple and spiraling into the shallow basin. The old man looked up at the sound, a faint weariness shadowing his eyes. Sorting memories always wore him down. "Ah, Vincent, you're just in time." Dumbledore waved his wand, and the last strands of memory sank into the Pensieve. "Please sit. Would you like some of the new lemon sherbet?" Vincent, however, ignored the sweets and stared at the silvered pool. Compared with desserts, the state of the Pensieve concerned him. There was noticeably less of the pale substance inside than the last time he'd visited. "It seems quite a few memories are missing," he observed. "Yes." Dumbledore nodded and stepped away from the basin. "Memories must be sorted, put in, take out, so that the important ones don't get lost. I wish I could always be so clear-headed, but I forget things all the same." Vincent, who had never used a Pensieve, changed tack. "Why did you send for me, Professor?" Dumbledore sat in a nearby chair. "It's about Barty Crouch." Vincent blinked. "But you told me you planned to see him after Christmas. It's been 2 months. I assumed he'd been all right." Dumbledore glanced back at the Pensieve, then shook his head faintly. "Perhaps I shouldn't let memories edge in and out of my mind so often." Chapter 349, Barty Crouch Jr. "So what exactly happened to Mr. Crouch?" Professor Vincent got straight to the point. Dumbledore tapped the armrest lightly. "Percy Weasley received a letter from Crouch yesterday," he said calmly. "The letter said he was going to Albania on important business and would temporarily hand over his ministry duties to Percy. Percy has written to me for advice. It's hardly appropriate for such a young man to run a department alone. Very strange, Professor Vincent said. Traveling abroad now would be a sensitive matter. What do you think, Albus? Vincent shook his head. I'm inclined to believe Mr. Crouch has been harmed. Those letters weren't written by him, and Percy hasn't seen him for more than 2 months. A fair assessment, Dumbledore said. A shadow of gravity passed over his face. Vincent shrugged. The best thing is to search Barty Crouch's house and see whether it supports that theory. Dumbledore considered for a moment. I don't think we should enter someone's home without permission. 2 minutes later, in a quiet London neighborhood, a soft, mournful cry echoed Fawkes's voice, and the air twisted. Professor Vincent and Dumbledore appeared in front of a gray-brown brick house that looked like any other Muggle residence. The shrubs were neatly trimmed and the windows set in dustless frames. A few passers-by paid them no heed. Is this Barty Crouch's house? Vincent asked, frowning at the dust on the windowsill. I believe so, Dumbledore said. He went to the front door and felt the knob. It was locked. Allahomora. The lock clicked open. Vincent shot him a look. Wasn't Dumbledore the one who had advised against trespass, but said nothing. The house was dark inside. Dumbledore's wand tip lit with a practiced lumos, and they stepped in. The living room was immaculate and eerily still, as if no one had lived there for weeks. Dust covers lay smooth over the sofas, the coffee table bore no water rings, and the ashes in the fireplace sat neat and undisturbed. On a side table lay a small clump of gray-white hair, an alarming amount that suggested stress or age. Who are you? A cold voice asked from the stairwell. They turned. A man stood in the shadows halfway up the stairs, wand in hand. The light from the hall fell on him as he stepped forward. Short, neat gray hair, a tidy trimmed beard, a stern face with sharp eyes and deepening wrinkles. Barty Crouch Sr., or so he appeared. Albus Dumbledore, Dumbledore said calmly. He explained their concern and why they had come. The man lowered his wand as if relieved. Albus, I thought you were an intruder. He pressed a switch by the wall and the room flooded with light. Only then did Vincent see how fine and practiced every line of the man's face was. Strictly speaking, we are intruders, Dumbledore conceded lightly. If we have offended you, I apologize. Don't trouble yourself, the man said. So, you're here to check on me? There's nothing to worry about. I'm merely tired. We also heard you were going to Albania, Dumbledore said. It seems you never left. The trip was cancelled, Albus, the man replied. If there is nothing else, please leave. I need to rest. All right, sorry to have disturbed you. Dumbledore inclined his head. He and Vincent turned toward the door. Impedimenta, the man's voice shouted. Stupefy. Vincent and Dumbledore answered at once. 2 spells flashed. The man caught and deflected them with a quick, practiced flick. He smiled then, something strained in it. What a pity, Dumbledore. His voice lost its outward calm and went thin. I thought you might have kept up the pretense a little longer. Vincent chuckled. In that instant, the false Barty glanced upward, just in time to see, too late, the ceiling erupt. A deflected spell from Vincent had struck the rafters, forcing loose several lengths of black iron chain that fell like living things. They wrapped around his arms and legs, hauled him to the floor, and his wand flew from his startled hand. Dumbledore caught it with a single, easy motion. Clever, Dumbledore said approvingly, looking to Vincent. Vincent's expression begged the question. Principal, is it proper to let me do the work while you stand by? Dumbledore, for his part, stepped forward toward the struggling man. Polyjuice, if I'm not mistaken, he observed. Who are you? The man did not answer. Dumbledore tapped his elder wand, and a soft light spread over the prisoner's face. The gray hair faded, the features shifted in sick, waxy ways. The disguise dissolved. Where the old man had stood, a younger, distorted face emerged. Schlubbed pale hair plastered to a forehead, yellowish skin stretched thin over visible veins, eyes wide with fever, a fanatic light blazing in them. Barty Crouch Jr. Long time no see, Dumbledore, Crouch Jr. croaked, his grin hoarse and trembling. Never thought we'd meet in a place like this. Dumbledore's face remained composed. The tip of his wand glowed. Where is your father? He asked directly. 350. 3 Death Eaters' father? Barty Crouch Jr. burst into a high, manic laugh that echoed through the empty sitting room. Chains clinked as he struggled. If you're wondering about that old man who put me in prison for over a decade, he rasped, Maybe he's in the kitchen. Or the cellar. No, check the garden. I've planted some new shrubs. Vincent and Dumbledore exchanged a look. The sarcasm was unmistakable. Dumbledore sighed. How did you escape Azkaban, Barty? And why are you out? To bring back Lord Voldemort. Barty shut his mouth and went still, stopping even his struggles. He knew what falling into Dumbledore's hands meant. Kill me, he said, almost reverent. It won't matter. My master will return. Dumbledore, you won't win. Vincent frowned at the fanaticism in the man's eyes. Dumbledore turned to him. Perhaps we can learn more. Vincent, any ideas? Vincent blinked once and reached into his inner robe. He produced what looked like a small ring box, which swelled in his palm into a compact briefcase. Inside were dozens of vials and tiny phials, each carefully labeled. Dumbledore caught sight of the contents and lifted a brow. There were vials of Veritaserum, and even 3 labels for Felix Felicis. He had underestimated the professor. Vincent withdrew a transparent vial in which a silvery liquid swirled. Barty's pupils shrank the instant he saw it. Veritaserum? He hissed, recoiling. You're going to use that on me? Less talk, Vincent snapped. He pulled the stopper with a rough motion and poured the Veritaserum into Barty's mouth. Barty spluttered and tried to spit, but the potion slid down his throat. Gradually, his eyes glazed. The edge of his resistance dissolved. Dumbledore inclined his head and asked, in a quiet, steady voice, How did you get out of Azkaban? I understood you were supposed to have died there. Barty's lips moved like a puppet's. My mother, he said without inflection. She used polyjuice and took my place. That man smuggled me home and controlled me with Imperio. Even with suspicions already formed, Dumbledore felt a chill at the confirmation. Old Barty Crouch, though disgraced, had been able to hold influential posts at the Ministry. It was not implausible that he could arrange such a switch. Then why did you kill your father? Dumbledore asked. Barty's face lit with feverish joy. To obey my master, he shouted, his cadence breaking beyond the potion's restraint. My master commands. His left arm spasmed. Through the sleeve, the dark mark faintly flared. Dumbledore's hand shot up. Someone's coming. Before he finished, the house shuddered. The ceiling above them collapsed with a thunderous crash as the front of the building exploded inward. Vincent threw up a shield charm, and debris slammed against the barrier in a shower of sparks. A green-streaked curse slashed through the dust and struck the shield. Dumbledore's elder wand traced a golden arc and deflected it. Outside, 3 figures wearing silver-white masks revealed themselves. Death Eaters. The same group who had caused the disturbance at the Quidditch World Cup. The tall one at the front flicked his wand, and the outer wall turned to rubble. They advanced in a triangular formation. Barty, under the potion, began to snarl with glee. Despite the dose Vincent had administered, enough to hold someone for nearly an hour, Barty was beginning to shake off the effects faster than he should have. My master has come to save me, he crowed. Dumbledore cut him off with a silent stupefy. Almost at once, 3 emerald jets of the killing curse tore through the smoke toward them. Vincent and Dumbledore moved as one. 2 earthen walls rose from the floor, taking the brunt of the spells. The curses shattered the walls, but neither Dumbledore nor Vincent was seriously hurt. Dumbledore's eyes flashed. With a quick, precise wrist, he sent a streak of golden light that punched a bowl-sized hole straight through the chest of the leftmost Death Eater. He went down with a muffled sound under his mask. Sectum Sempra, Dumbledore's voice echoed. Vincent was already in motion. An invisible blade sliced through the air. The Death Eater on the right was decapitated, his head tumbling and blood splattering the broken stones. The 2 attackers collapsed. Their magic had met something far beyond what they'd bargained for. Now is not the time to discuss technique, Vincent said curtly after a heartbeat, although Dumbledore only stroked his beard and smiled faintly at the skilled display. The remaining Death Eater, clearly rattled, backed away, and in a desperate move, hurled a crystal vial toward the chained Barty. Defindo, he cried. Vincent tapped his wand, and the vial exploded harmlessly in midair, but something inside it unleashed a dark green beam that struck Barty's prone form. Barty screamed as the green light ate through flesh and muscle. The sound was ghastly and short. In mere seconds, the living tissue dissolved, leaving only a bleached skeleton and the clatter of chains. The Death Eater's vial had contained a corrosive curse designed to annihilate life to the bone. Silence fell over the ruined room, punctuated only by the settling dust and the labored breaths of the two surviving wizards. Chapter 350, Eternal Doom. After what had happened to Barty, Vincent eyed the man who had thrown the crystal vial with a growing suspicion. Such a powerful object, used not on them but on one of their own, suggested an inside hand. His suspicion hardened when the remaining Death Eater repeated the action. 2 crystal vials flew in a perfect arc and landed squarely on his companion's body. The glass broke with a crisp, horrible sound. A corrosive sizzle filled the air. Flesh melted before their eyes. In seconds, blood and muscle turned to green smoke and vanished, leaving only white bones. Destroying the evidence? Vincent narrowed his eyes and already had his wand raised at the last Death Eater. "It seems you're very afraid of being identified." The Death Eater did not answer. He ripped off his mask, revealing a scarred, unfamiliar face. Vincent searched his memory for any record of him, but found nothing. Dumbledore shook his head. The man, if he was anyone of note, showed no sign of recognition on the professor's faces. Instead, he gave a strange smile. "You don't know me, do you? It doesn't matter." Before he could finish, his skin began to writhe as though something moved under it. Vincent reacted immediately. "Stand back," he snapped. Dumbledore felt it too. Both stepped away as the Death Eater's body inflated like a balloon. A dangerous green light pulsed beneath cracked skin. With a mad shout, "Long live the Dark Lord!" his body exploded. They had braced for gore, but nothing human sprayed forth. Instead, fragments of parchment flew in every direction. The ruin around them was surreal. 3 skeletons, torn parchment, and 2 grim-faced men. Vincent snatched at one of the fragments. Black, bold words were printed on it. "With the remainder of my life, I curse you, and you shall receive eternal doom." The letters twisted as he watched, coiling into a small, black snake that lunged and bit Vincent's fingertip. He reacted in a flash. Fire flared out of nowhere and incinerated the snake, but it was too late. A wisp of black energy had already slipped into the skin of his arm. A curse? Dumbledore's face turned grave. He seized Vincent's arm, rolled back his sleeve, and saw a dark mark spreading beneath the skin like something alive. The pattern writhed and coiled, resolving into a hideous skull surrounded by a venomous snake with a flicking tongue. "It is indeed a curse," Dumbledore said, his voice unusually heavy, very old and very cunning. The Tree of Wisdom had analyzed Vincent's status the moment the curse took hold. Eternal doom. Curse. It was a curse cast at the cost of the caster's life, no trivial enchantment. Dumbledore tried a series of counterspells, waving his wand and murmuring incantations, but nothing affected the pattern. "This is far worse than I imagined," he said, wiping sweat from his brow. "There may be a remedy in the Hogwarts library. I've read of this curse. When I was still a student." Vincent's expression hardened. He trained his wand on the spreading mark. "Impedimenta." From the tip of his wand shot tiny silver chains that burrowed beneath the skin. They threaded and wound under the flesh, tangling around the skull and snake design and holding it fast. The mark writhed violently, but could not break free from the binding. Dumbledore raised an eyebrow. "An interesting solution. You applied a forbidden spell directly within the body." "It's only a temporary suppression," Vincent interrupted, flexing his arm. The pattern was locked, though it's still twitching faintly. "I'll find a true cure later." With the immediate danger contained, they took in the ruined scene. The living were dead, and the already dead reduced to bones. Any clues about what Voldemort was planning had been destroyed. "Tom must be preparing something big," Dumbledore said. "He's terrified of us learning what he's doing." Vincent nodded. Knowing Voldemort was scheming didn't help much. As long as Voldemort hid, they would have no concrete leads. Dumbledore crouched by Barty's skeleton and gave a small, sorrowful sigh. Then he turned to Vincent with a solemn look. "It seems the Order of the Phoenix will have to mobilize sooner than planned. Professor Vincent, until things settle, I hope you will watch over Harry and protect him." "Of course," Vincent replied. He had no intention of leaving Harry unguarded, especially now. After they finished at the ruin, Fawkes carried Dumbledore and Vincent back to Hogwarts. Dumbledore arranged for a thorough search of the area. Nothing was to be overlooked. That afternoon, Vincent made his way to the library. The general reading rooms were unusually busy. Apparently, the staff had given the students a lot of homework lately, but he threaded through the stacks down to the farthest corner, the restricted section. It was quieter here, but he wasn't alone. Draco Malfoy stood in front of a shelf, flipping through a book of spells. Any book in the restricted section was dangerous or advanced. Access required a professor's signature. Malfoy's presence there meant Professor Snape had signed him in. Vincent had no interest in checking permissions, and he passed behind the boy. Suddenly, the book in Malfoy's hands sprouted two withered arms that shot out and clamped around the boy's throat. Malfoy choked, eyes wide with terror, and in a panic tore the volume away and threw it into the air. Vincent reached out and caught the falling book, sliding the two pale hands back inside its pages, as if tucking in a living thing. "Mr. Malfoy," he said with a reproachful sigh, "books need to be treated with care. I don't think you want to incur Madame Pince's wrath." Malfoy stood pale and shaken, one hand unconsciously at his neck, as though he could still feel the ghost of those withered fingers. Chapter 352, Luck and Misfortune. "That book is going to kill me." Mr. Malfoy's voice trembled, pitched far higher than usual. "I was nearly strangled." Vincent watched the panicked man calmly and handed the book back. "You're overreacting," he said. "It's only a prank charm. Those arms couldn't even strangle a mouse." Mr. Malfoy's breathing was still rapid. He swallowed hard. "But it really felt." Vincent shrugged, cutting him off. "That was your imagination, Mr. Malfoy. You should have been prepared before coming into the restricted section. Besides, Madame Pince has moved the genuinely dangerous books elsewhere. I must be off. Good day." He turned and walked further into the restricted section, leaving Mr. Malfoy standing there with the book, bewildered. Fortunately, all the books on curses had been shelved together. Vincent only had to search for a few hours before he found what he was looking for: an old, dusty diary about the eternal misfortune curse. The owner had written under the name Edmund Lestrange. He claimed to be an otherwise ordinary wizard, driven to create the curse by a sympathetic motive. His wife and his younger brother had an affair, and in a rage he cursed them. The diary included a passage: "For 3 years I walked like a blind man, ignoring their flirtations right under my nose. One afternoon, I found a silencing spell on my bedroom door." It was a sad story. Vincent read the diary through, but the only possible solution Edmund recorded was a single line: "Breaking this curse requires powerful magic. My wife and brother have absolutely no hope." Vincent closed the diary. It was nonsense to expect someone to put the method for breaking their own curse in their diary. Of course, he'd leave out the crucial details. He would have to find another way. Who would know more about this ancient curse? Vincent considered his options. Suddenly, his eyes lit up. It was already late. He went back to his office and into his greenhouse. "Oh, welcome, Blazy. Dobby was just a little tired." Dobby, who had been dozing under the street lamp by the entrance, Vincent never did understand why Dobby had installed a street lamp, sniffed out his presence, and jumped up. "It's after work, Dobby," Vincent said. "Dobby is working overtime," Dobby announced cheerfully. "Dobby gets paid." "We don't have overtime pay," Vincent said with a shrug. "Never mind. Do as you please." Dobby nodded and disappeared, presumably off to tend whatever he called overtime. Vincent followed the new flagstone path Dobby had laid to the Tree of Wisdom. The tree looked the same as ever, at least outwardly. He rarely used its power, but it possessed Ravenclaw's wisdom, a resource he needed now. Vincent pressed his hand to the trunk. In the next instant, he was standing in a pure white space. A silver-white figure appeared, and a few minutes later, his consciousness returned. A slim, gray-white book had appeared in his hand, the hints from Ravenclaw. He opened it eagerly and found only one line. "For all curses tied to misfortune, luck may be used to suppress them." He frowned. Using luck to counter misfortune made sense in principle, but both misfortune and luck were intangible. Then he remembered something in his suitcase of potions. Felix Felicis. Tangible, bottled luck. He had nearly forgotten he still had some. Brewing it had cost him a great deal of time and resources. Without hesitation, he uncorked a bottle and drank it. The potion slid warm down his throat, bringing the familiar sensation. The world seemed to make way for him. He waited for it to take effect. 10 seconds, 30 seconds. 1 minute passed. Aside from a lingering sweetness on his tongue and warmth in his stomach, he felt nothing extraordinary. A small notification came through from the tree's magic. Status: Eternal Misfortune Curse. Breakthrough progress: 5%. So the Felix Felicis had some effect, but only a little. One small bottle of Felix Felicis had only reduced the curse by 5%. He would need 20 such bottles to break it completely. Did he think Felix Felicis was water? Vincent checked his inventory. He wasn't even halfway there. To brew enough would take at least half a year, probably longer, given his mediocre brewing skill. The dozen batches he had attempted before had mostly failed. Only 2 had survived, the result of quantity over quality. The materials had already eaten into his savings. Money wasn't the worst part, time was. Vincent looked at the cursed mark locked on his arm. If he couldn't break the curse soon, misfortune would make his life miserable. From experience, misfortune rarely killed outright, but it could maim. He risked losing an arm or a leg, and that would drastically change his life. Worse, Lord Voldemort's resurrection was approaching. He needed a way to obtain enough Felix Felicis, fast. When Vincent left the restricted section, he was surprised to find Mr. Malfoy still there. "Mr. Malfoy," he asked with mild curiosity, "why haven't you left yet?" Mr. Malfoy snapped his book closed and looked up. "That's none of your business." He paused, then, with studied indifference, said, "As you can see, Professor, I am studying magic." Vincent glanced at the book in Malfoy's hands. Merrick Richards teaches the common dark arts. Minors should study under parental supervision. A very ordinary book, even with the warning on the cover. Mr. Malfoy had clearly ignored it. Vincent couldn't blame him. He'd done the same when he was a student. Chapter 353, More Felix Felicis. Vincent didn't object to students studying the dark arts, but as a professor, he still felt obliged to offer warnings. "Studying magic?" he said with a small smile. "Of course, Professor Vincent," Draco Malfoy replied, but then he shook his head. "That's not enough. I need to learn more powerful magic." Vincent raised an eyebrow. "Powerful magic? Most of the dark arts are useless. Strange, yes, but not especially powerful. True power comes from mastering the right methods and practicing. Look at Dumbledore. He doesn't use the dark arts, yet he's the most powerful wizard in the world." Malfoy listened, then exhaled slowly. "Time is pressing, Professor," he said. "If you're trying to dissuade me, it won't work. Besides, Professor Snape permits me to study here." Vincent was taken aback that Malfoy would admit openly to a professor that he was studying the dark arts. If it had been Professor McGonagall, she would have been furious. Vincent, however, was more pragmatic. Understanding the dark arts was the best defense against them. Besides, it would be odd for a Slytherin not to be curious. "Very well, Mr. Malfoy," he said. "But when you practice the dark arts, stay close to Professor Snape. He can help you with many problems. And," he leaned in and lowered his voice, "never get involved with Lord Voldemort. From what I know, everyone who gets close to him ends badly." Malfoy looked surprised. He'd assumed Vincent disliked him. He didn't expect a warning like that. Vincent turned and left the restricted section, leaving the choice up to the student. The next morning, Sunday, Vincent arrived in the headmaster's office early. "You mean that curse requires Felix Felicis to remove?" Dumbledore peered at him from behind his desk. "If I remember correctly, you had quite a bit in stock." "Not enough," Vincent answered curtly. "Brewing more would take too long. Professor Dumbledore, if you have any finished potion, I'd like to buy some." Felix Felicis was always in demand and in short supply. A bottle on the black market sent people scrambling. Vincent didn't want to hunt on the black market if he could avoid it. Dumbledore smiled and rose to go to Fawkes' perch. The phoenix was preening its golden red plumage. Dumbledore stopped in front of a plain oak cabinet behind the bird, murmured a password, "Lemon sherbet," a favorite, and the door slid open to reveal dozens of velvet-lined compartments. "Ah, here it is," Dumbledore said, taking a small bottle from a top-shelf compartment. Vincent examined the glittering gold liquid, genuine and clearly expertly brewed. He tilted the bottle and watched the liquid flow. "Are there more?" he asked. He looked frustrated. "I don't think this will be enough. I might need a pint." "That's difficult, Professor Vincent," Dumbledore said, frowning. "Felix Felicis is very rare. If we were a few years earlier, Nicholas Flamel came to mind." Dumbledore paused, then brightened. "There is someone else you might try." Slughorn, Vincent supplied. Professor Slughorn, Dumbledore agreed cheerfully. It seems you remember your old teacher. Vincent nodded. Horace Slughorn had been his potions professor until Snape took over. Slughorn had been witty, enthusiastic, and he had a reputation for hoarding valuable potions and favors. Vincent had been a member of the Slug Club for a short time. They had even corresponded for a while after Slughorn retired. But Slughorn moved frequently, and their correspondence had petered out. Dumbledore continued, Slughorn is skilled at brewing. From what I know, he does like to keep his more precious bottles. Where he lives now, however, I'm not entirely sure. He's moved a dozen times since retirement and never left a permanent address. I can get in touch with him, but it will take time, perhaps until next week. That's fine, Vincent said with relief. Thank you, Professor. Dumbledore waved off the thanks. This all began as misfortune, really. Perhaps I shouldn't have taken you to Crouch's house. Still, there is one more place I'd like you to go with me. Where? Vincent asked, puzzled. Had Dumbledore found Voldemort? Do you remember the evil items Voldemort made? The diary? The locket? Dumbledore's tone grew grave. Horcruxes, Vincent said immediately. Dumbledore nodded. I don't have definite proof yet, only a hypothesis. Recently, I've been sifting through many memories of Tom Riddle. I taught him once, as you know. Among those memories, I found hints suggesting he may have hidden his Horcruxes in his family's old home. Vincent's eyes narrowed. You think his family home could be the key? Just a guess, Dumbledore said slowly, but it is a lead worth following. Chapter 353, Riddle Manor and Gaunt Manor. The moment Vincent heard about the Horcrux, he was instantly alert. If nothing went wrong, finding one more of Lord Voldemort's Horcruxes would complete his sister's soul. When do we leave? He asked the headmaster. Fawkes gave a long, low cry from the corner. Now, Dumbledore said, and take Fawkes' companion with us. We'll need it for watchfulness. Don't let us repeat the last time. Vincent was surprised at how quickly Fawkes summoned the creature called Lay. Within minutes, Dumbledore and Vincent stood on a hillside outside Little Hangleton. Riddle Manor loomed through the mist, its outline faint and broken. Lay hovered in the sky, its keen eyes cutting through the fog as the two approached. They crossed an overgrown front yard, boots crunching dead leaves. The house looked worse than Vincent had imagined. The main door hung crooked. Window panes were shattered, boards that might once have sealed openings had fallen askew. The dark, gaping windows watched them like empty sockets. One of the house's spires had a large hole. The east tower had collapsed entirely. Riddle Manor had been a Muggle residence and carried no protective wards. Its open doors and windows suggested it had been ransacked long ago, perhaps more than once. If a Horcrux had been hidden here, Vincent thought, it was likely already taken. They stepped through the entrance. Dumbledore's old wand cast a soft glow that revealed cobwebs and dust. The floorboards creaked as if the house might fall in at any moment. Dust swirled into the air. Vincent pulled his scarf over his mouth. Wallpaper peeled in strips, crooked portraits hung at odd angles. Once grand, the house now stank of decay and abandonment. A Horcrux wouldn't be hidden in a random place, Dumbledore said, voice echoing. Tom favors symbolism, Dumbledore went on, places tied to his blood, his past. So where do we begin? Vincent asked. We'll split up. Dumbledore tossed him a small, transparent bead. Keep this. If it glows, it means traces of the dark arts are near. And be careful. Tom may have left traps. Vincent turned the bead over in his hand. It was no larger than a marble, unnaturally clear and pure. Dumbledore had clearly enchanted it for detection. An hour later, they rejoined in the hall, both empty-handed. Vincent had searched nearly every room. The bead had shown no reaction. He wondered if it were faulty. Dumbledore stroked his beard. It seems Tom hid nothing here. Perhaps he found his father's line too. Insignificant. Come, Vincent, we have another place to check before noon. Gaunt Manor lay in Great Hangleton, 4 or 5 miles from Little Hangleton, the ancestral home of Tom Riddle's mother, Merope Gaunt. Dumbledore led the way along an overgrown path until they reached a small, dilapidated wooden house ringed by twisted trees. This place was worse in its own way. The planks were blackened and cracked, the roof shingled in holes. It didn't look fit for habitation, yet there was the faint trace of a Muggle-repelling charm in the air. As Vincent reached the door, the transparent bead trembled, and a pale, greenish light flickered within it. "It's reacting," he whispered, holding it up. Dumbledore's eyes sharpened. "Our luck improves." To avoid the mistake they'd made at Barty Crouch's house, Lai began a steady patrol above. Dumbledore pushed the wooden door open with surprising ease. A thin gust carried the smell of mold and something rank, old rot, or long-dead flesh, and Vincent had to fight the urge to gag. Sunlight only found the room through gaps in the boards. Vincent sent a mote of light from his wand to the ceiling, and it drifted up, casting a weak illumination. Inside, broken furniture lay in a heap, a three-legged table, overturned chairs, a rusted pot. The hearth was full of cold ashes, bundles of dried herbs hung on the mantel, long drained of any power. "Someone's been here," Vincent murmured. A faint footprint pressed into the dust showed at his boots, its edges blunted by time. "At least 6 months old," he said. "An adult male's size, but smaller than you, Professor." Dumbledore crouched to examine it. "Likely one of Tom's followers," he said. "We're in the right place." Then the bead in Vincent's hand vibrated violently. The green light flared until it seemed to pierce his fingers. The two men looked up together. Between the bricks above the fireplace, a faint, unnatural glint caught the light. "Stay where you are," Dumbledore said softly, tightening his grip on his wand. He approached the mantel slowly. Vincent drew his own wand, ready for anything. There was no trap to spring. Dumbledore slipped his hand between the bricks and drew out an object with an almost casual motion. He held it a moment, looking at it as if seeing something far beyond the room. Vincent stepped closer. It was an old gold ring, crudely worked, a large black stone set into its face. Under the light, it seemed to absorb light and yet pulse with a sinister glow. The bead, as if compelled to speak, sent a cold whisper of words into Vincent's mind. Name, Marvolo Gaunt's ring. Status, an evil soul is attached. Recommendation, keep your distance immediately. Chapter 354, Vincent and Dumbledore. Is it really a Horcrux? When the Tree of Wisdom confirmed the ring, the tightness in Vincent's chest eased at last. He calmly produced a small vial from his briefcase. The liquid inside shimmered with a faint blue light. Bottled fiendfire, always effective. "Professor Dumbledore," he said, "give me the Horcrux. I'm ready." He shook the dangerous blue liquid in his hand as he spoke, but Dumbledore seemed not to hear. "The Resurrection Stone," the headmaster murmured, his eyes glassy and fanatical. His fingers trembled as he tried to slip the ring onto his right ring finger. Alarm tightened Vincent's throat. This wasn't right. Fortunately, his wand was already in his hand. "Accio, ring!" he cried. Quick as thought, Vincent swept his wand. The black gemmed ring flew out of Dumbledore's hand and arced toward him. Dumbledore, however, reacted just as fast. With a slight movement of his wand, an invisible barrier appeared and intercepted the ring. It hit the shield with a metallic clink, fell to the floor, and spun between the two wizards. "Vincent." Dumbledore's voice was low and dangerous. "This is the Resurrection Stone. I cannot miss this opportunity. You must understand." Vincent watched him, alarm bells now ringing. Dumbledore was clearly under the ring's influence. "Professor," Vincent said, trying to reach him, "you've been affected by the dark arts. You're not thinking clearly." "I've never been clearer, Vincent." Dumbledore stepped toward the ring with an expression that didn't quite belong to him. "The Gaunt family ring, the Resurrection Stone. I could not be mistaken. The old wand, the invisibility cloak. You know the legend of the Deathly Hallows." Vincent nodded, and at the same time tapped the Tree of Wisdom for confirmation. Status, thought interference. Dumbledore's words were steady, but his body betrayed him. "The Resurrection Stone," Dumbledore said, stopping over the ring. "The legendary hallow that can bring back the dead. You understand what that means, Vincent." Vincent refused to let himself be swayed. "Magic can create wonders," he said, voice level, "but this ring cannot bring people back. Not truly." Dumbledore bent down, fingertips trembling above the fallen ring. For the first time, his voice wavered. "Even if there's only a 1 in 10,000 chance," he said, finally admitting, "I must try." With a shrug of resigned anger, Vincent began to reason with him, until he decided reasoning was useless. He lashed out instead. "Stupefy!" he shouted. A scarlet bolt of stupefy hurled toward Dumbledore like a lance. The headmaster shifted almost casually. The spell grazed his silver hair and punched a shocking hole in the wall behind him. Dumbledore looked at Vincent with a flash of disbelief. A single stupefy had blasted through stone. If a normal witch or wizard had taken that, they'd be in Madame Pomfrey's care for a day. Vincent had not held back. Facing the most powerful wizard in the world, restraint would have been foolish. This spell had been amplified to the fullest, 100% energy amplification. "I'm sorry, Vincent, but it isn't enough." Dumbledore's voice steadied. His wand was already leveled at Vincent. "Expelliarmus!" A shield sprang into being. Vincent's stupefy slammed into the barrier with a shower of sparks. The recoil still sent Vincent stumbling backward. Dumbledore's presence pressed down on him like a physical thing. Vincent narrowed his eyes. The headmaster, too, was using his full strength. Very well, let Vincent see the greatest wizard's full power and see exactly how far he had to go. "Impedimenta!" he cried. Chains, dozens of them in all sizes and thicknesses, erupted into being at his command and flew at Dumbledore like whips. Normally, such a conjuration would be devastating. Today, it faltered. Dumbledore raised his left hand, and the chains seemed to strike an invisible wall and fall. "A good attempt," he said, "but to deal with me, you'll need more creative magic." The fallen chains sprang back to life, rearing like venomous serpents. Their ends transformed into razor blades, and they lunged from every direction. Dumbledore's pupils contracted, and his wand traced a golden arc. "Protego!" The clash of metal on shield was as loud and dense as a thunderstorm. Ripples crawled across Dumbledore's barrier. Several of the sharper chains even pierced it, forcing him to dodge. One bit into his robe, scratching his cheek. Dumbledore panted slightly, a hint of admiration in his eyes. "Compound transfiguration with a touch of the forbidden curses," he observed. "Very imaginative." Vincent said nothing. He focused on driving the chains, making them weave a tightening net around Dumbledore, shrinking his space to move. The metal seemed to take on a life of its own until one chain pierced Dumbledore's robe. Then the headmaster shouted, "Finite incantatum!" A wave of invisible force burst out from Dumbledore. The chains dissolved into silver powder and scattered like snow. Vincent felt a throb of irritation. Having his spell broken so cleanly left a headache. Could finite incantatum, usually requiring precise work and often teamwork, be unleashed so effortlessly by one man? He was surprised. Before Vincent could recover, Dumbledore's voice rang out again. "Accio! Ring!" From the very beginning, the headmaster's priority had been that ring and not the duel. Vincent would not let him have it. As Dumbledore called, he dragged his wand in a large circle and chanted one more spell. Earthquake. The old floorboards and stone of the gaunt house rose and fell like ocean waves. Rubble and splintered wood churned into a violent vortex, and the obsidian ring was swept into the chaos. Dumbledore's accio was interrupted mid-pull. He had to duck and dodge as fragments of rock and timber flew in every direction. Chapter 355, A Fake. When the dust finally settled, the gaunt shack was almost unrecognizable. The already dilapidated house had been reduced to rubble. Only a few stubborn beams jutted out from the ruins, and splintered wood and stone lay scattered in every direction. Professor Vincent stood panting, his robes torn and a deep cut on his right arm bleeding freely. But for a wizard of his power, the wound was nothing more than an annoyance. Dumbledore looked equally battered, hair and beard dust-streaked and his robes rent in places, though he appeared otherwise unharmed. Between them, half buried in the wreckage, the cursed ring lay quietly on a pile of rubble. Both men were only a few steps away from it. "You've improved quite rapidly, Professor Vincent," Dumbledore said hoarsely. Vincent managed a small, wry smile. "I still have a long way to go." For a moment, Vincent's thudding heart finally eased. The mind-affecting magic Voldemort had set upon Dumbledore would not hold long against someone of his caliber. The glazed confusion in Dumbledore's eyes had already faded. Voldemort's beguiling could not overcome the will of the greatest wizard of his age. After a brief pause, Dumbledore bowed his head. "I must apologize," he said. "I fell into Lord Voldemort's trap. Pick up the ring and destroy it, Professor Vincent. In this matter, you have been more professional than I." "There's no need to blame yourself, Professor." Vincent shook his head, then reached and picked the ring up from the rubble. He turned it over thoughtfully. "I have a way to purge a soul fragment without damaging the resurrection stone," he said. "There's a good chance I can remove whatever piece of him might be inside without harming the artifact." Dumbledore's shoulders tensed for an instant and then relaxed. He took a cautious step away from the ring. "Very well, do as you think best," he sighed. "The resurrection stone cannot bring back the dead. I have known that for some time." Vincent smiled faintly, relieved to see Dumbledore back to his clear-eyed self. He drew from his satchel a compact briefcase, his portable portal, and set it on the ground. The Tree of Wisdom could, through the portal, absorb a soul. He did not bother to hide its use any longer. Once he took this last fragment, he intended to dispense with collecting Horcruxes by other means and finish the rest with fiendfire if necessary. He opened the briefcase, laid the portal flat, and took from it a vial of purification potion. Everything was ready. Dumbledore watched the potion in Vincent's hand, thoughtful. "It can separate a soul fragment?" "It can," Vincent said, and poured a few drops onto the ring. 30 seconds passed. Nothing happened. The ring did not react. "It seems your method didn't work," Dumbledore said softly, watching Vincent with a puzzled expression. "No." Vincent's voice was grim. "The soul fragment isn't there. This is not a Horcrux at all. It's a fake. We've been set up." At that instant, the Tree of Wisdom's information changed in Vincent's mind. Name, fake Marvolo Gaunt's ring. Previous judgment was incorrect. "I apologize, sir. The tree rarely erred." Vincent looked at the ring in his hand, his eyelid twitching. Had Voldemort managed to fool even the Tree of Wisdom? It was a fascinating, if unsettling, trick. Hearing Vincent's words, Dumbledore's eyes sharpened. He stepped forward, took the ring, and turned it over in his hands, examining it closely. "He's right," Dumbledore said quietly and with a note of solemn admiration. "This is not a Horcrux. The evil aura on it is counterfeit, fiendishly clever. Tom didn't hide a Horcrux here." Vincent considered it a moment. "Maybe it was here originally," he offered. "Or perhaps Tom knew we were searching and got frightened. He could have had someone remove the real Horcrux and leave this imitation as a trap. The footprints at the entrance suggest someone came and went." "A sensible theory," Dumbledore agreed, though his expression betrayed a rueful helplessness. Being duped by a counterfeit resurrection stone stung his pride. He was, after all, getting older. "Tom is more cunning and cautious than most believe," Dumbledore said. "He cannot be underestimated." "Especially now that he's already lost 3 Horcruxes," Vincent added. 3. Dumbledore's brow furrowed. "Diary, Slytherin's locket, what else?" He fixed Vincent with a look. Vincent realized with a start that he had let something slip he had intended to keep to himself. Dumbledore inclined his head and put on that mild, persistent smile that could disarm questions. "Perhaps you could explain, Professor Vincent," he said, emphasizing the last word, "about those 3 Horcruxes you mentioned." Vincent opened his mouth to answer, but before he could speak, the Tree of Wisdom's voice, urgent and rare, echoed in his mind. "Sir, the ring!" Vincent's eyes went to the ring. A faint green light pulsed from its surface, barely perceptible unless one looked directly. The tree's agitation told him there was something odd about the imitation, after all. Whatever it was, it had just set off an alarm. He tossed the ring onto the ground, drew his second wand, the firewood wand, and without hesitation uttered the incantation for fiendfire. The spell erupted like a living thing from the wand's tip, a roaring, malevolent blaze that leaped forward and engulfed the fake ring. Dumbledore, expression unreadable, took a small step back. Even for him, fiendfire was a dangerous, unpredictable force. He kept his distance as the hellish flames hungrily consumed the ring. Chapter 357, News Leak. Fiendfire still raged, restless tongues of flame snaking around the room. Vincent had to keep his focus on controlling it with his firewood wand. He should have used the liquid form of fiendfire. After 2.5 minutes of burning, he waved his wand and the flames began to draw back, sucking themselves into the shaft. Crack! When the last of the fire was reabsorbed, the wand's shaft split with several fine fissures. Sparks leapt out and singed Vincent's fingers. He wasn't surprised. The firewood wand could control fiendfire, but it had a fatal flaw. It was brittle. Prolonged use would crack and ruin it. In short, it was disposable. He pocketed the ruined wand and glanced down. The ring was gone. Only a small pile of ash remained where it had been. That should have been the end of it, but the ash on the floor began to stir without a breeze, eddying and coalescing into a shape. Vincent stepped back, wand already raised. "Professor, be careful," he murmured. Dumbledore had also taken a step away. The ash rose and formed the distorted outline of a human face, undeniably Lord Voldemort's. It was not the noseless horror Vincent remembered from portraits. This face looked far more like a young Tom Riddle. "I've been waiting for you," the ash-formed face said. Vincent wouldn't listen to any of Voldemort's prattle. He cast a reductor curse, but the spell passed through the ash as if it were air. The ash reassembled, and a mocking smile creased the young face. "Save your spells," Voldemort said. "Don't be nervous. This is only a transmitting charm. I cannot act from this." "What do you want?" Dumbledore asked, expression unreadable. "Nothing, Dumbledore," Voldemort replied flippantly. "I just wanted to catch up with an old acquaintance." Dumbledore's voice was flat. "There is nothing to say between us, Tom." "Oh, not with you," Voldemort said. "We'll talk later, Dumbledore." He turned his hollow gaze toward Vincent. "I heard your conversation." His face darkened with displeasure. "This gentleman mentioned destroying 3 of my Horcruxes? That is unacceptable." Vincent's face remained composed. "And," Voldemort leaned in as if he could touch Vincent's cheek. "Do you remember?" he hissed. "We met once. Back then I could only dwell in the mind of a worthless man, and you ruined my plan." "So what?" Vincent answered coolly. "I remember you. Adrian Wisen." He pronounced the name like a threat. "Do you think you're frightening me?" Vincent ignored the attempt at intimidation. "If you have anything to say, say it. I value my time." Voldemort's features twisted at Vincent's impatience. "How rude, Mr. Vincent. What I have to say is simple. Stop looking for my Horcruxes. You will not find them. They have been moved to places you would never imagine." "You seem very confident, Tom," Dumbledore remarked. "Do not interrupt," Voldemort snapped. "Await my return, Dumbledore. You will not be able to stop me." With that, the face crumbled back into ash and blew away on a gust of wind. For a few seconds, neither Vincent nor Dumbledore moved. Voldemort had vanished so abruptly, they couldn't even react. "Perhaps we said something we shouldn't have," Vincent admitted. "Who would have guessed that the ring could be used for eavesdropping?" "It's bad," Dumbledore said, thoughtful and troubled. At that moment, Lay descended from above, confirming that the surrounding area was clear. At least they hadn't run into any Death Eaters tonight. By evening, they were back at Hogwarts. Vincent briefly explained what had happened with the Ravenclaw diadem to Dumbledore. The headmaster said little, only warning him to keep it safe. For Vincent, the day had gone poorly. He had failed to locate any more Horcruxes and had inadvertently let Voldemort know that 3 of them had been destroyed. Worse, Voldemort apparently had already taken steps to safeguard his remaining Horcruxes. That meant his sister's illness could not be entirely cured yet. Obtaining the remaining Horcruxes would be far more difficult from now on. The only useful thing Vincent had learned was that Voldemort was utterly confident in his ability to return, so confident that he casually spoke of his imminent resurrection in front of Dumbledore. Vincent didn't know on what the Dark Lord based that certainty, but time felt increasingly short. Time moved on, and soon it was mid-February. News of Barty Crouch's disappearance had spread like wildfire. Apart from Dumbledore and Vincent, nobody knew the truth, that Barty Crouch had been killed by his son. When Ministry officials had searched Crouch's home, they found only a partially collapsed house and signs of dark arts. It was assumed he had been murdered. Vincent had no clear view of the political fallout at the Ministry, but he noticed the changes at Hogwarts. Percy's visits had become noticeably more frequent and hurried. Ludo Bagman, who was already overworked with the Triwizard Tournament less than 10 days away, had been forced to take on many of old Barty's responsibilities after his sudden disappearance. It was bizarre. The tournament hadn't even reached its midpoint, yet one head had been taken out of commission and a judge was dead. It was remarkable the event could continue at all. Dumbledore, too, had grown busier and spent more time away from school. Every time Vincent approached the headmaster's office, the door was shut. The gargoyle at the entrance no longer responded to his password. When Vincent asked Professor McGonagall about it, she sighed. "I see him only at breakfast, when I'm fortunate," she said. "He seems very busy of late, and often has to be elsewhere. Fortunately, Hogwarts is always well managed. So far, it hasn't affected anything." Vincent suspected Dumbledore was occupied with the Order of the Phoenix or searching for signs of Voldemort. In any case, the headmaster had been absent for a long stretch. Vincent hadn't even had a chance to ask about Horace Slughorn. Chapter 357, Horace Slughorn, February 23. There was only one day left until the second task of the Triwizard Tournament. That evening, Vincent went to the main gate to wait, just as Professor McGonagall had instructed. Albus didn't say anything else, she had written, only that you should go to the school gate at 6 in the evening and wait. It sounded strange, but Vincent obeyed. He trusted Dumbledore had his reasons. The sun sank, painting Hogwarts in a warm, golden light. Vincent leaned against a pillar by the main gate and stared up at the darkening sky. Hello? The voice pulled him out of his thoughts. Vincent turned and found a round, rosy-faced wizard standing there. He wore a brown plaid robe draped with several chains hung with glittering gemstones. Sparse gray hair framed his face. His beard was thick but neatly trimmed. His most striking feature was the bulging, golden-glinting eyes that seemed to take everything in. "Professor Slughorn?" Vincent asked in surprise. Slughorn paused, then studied Vincent from head to toe. "Vincent?" he said uncertainly. Vincent nodded. "It's me." Slughorn's eyes brightened. He spread his arms and exclaimed, "Oh, it really is you, my student. I almost didn't recognize you." Then, without warning, he pulled Vincent into a firm hug. The rich scent of dragon blood ink and an expensive perfume washed over Vincent as the golden chains on Slughorn's chest clinked and the gemstone pendants jingled against him. "Professor Dumbledore mentioned you in his letter," Slughorn said as he released him, patting Vincent's shoulder. "He told me you're teaching at Hogwarts and are very popular with the students. Welcome back to Hogwarts." Vincent smiled genuinely. "Did Dumbledore invite you here?" "That's right." Slughorn stroked his meticulously groomed beard. "Dumbledore invited me to watch the Triwizard Tournament. What a spectacle! I almost refused until he mentioned your name. I came specifically to see you. A decade or more makes one forget a face." Vincent wondered what Dumbledore had written to make Slughorn come for his sake, or whether it was merely Slughorn's flattering vanity. Slughorn had always seemed practical, with someone who cultivated connections with famous and successful people. Vincent certainly didn't count himself among them. He was just a teacher with a modest skill for a little magic. Night had fallen by then. The two of them walked toward the castle. "How nostalgic," Slughorn said, looking around. "I can't wait to eat Hogwarts food again." Vincent shrugged. "The house elves haven't changed the menu in over a decade, except lately. They've added a lot of variety, probably because of the Triwizard Tournament." "Then I've come at the perfect time," Slughorn said cheerfully. "You could easily return to teaching at Hogwarts. The students would love your potions class." "Oh, no, my dear." Slughorn waved his hands. The gemstone chains made a crisp sound. "I'm quite enjoying my retirement," he winked. "Besides, Severus can teach potions very well. I'm sure of it." "What a pity," Vincent said. They passed the Black Lake, and Slughorn stopped. Under the moonlight, the lake gleamed faintly, but on the far bank rows of seats had been set up, neat, formal, and oddly out of place in the natural darkness. "What is that?" Slughorn asked. Vincent glanced over. "Oh, I forgot to mention. The second task of the Triwizard Tournament will be held here. That's probably Ludo Bagman's doing. He's in charge of the competition." Hurried footsteps sounded behind them, and a breathless, booming voice called, "Aha! Professor Vincent? What a surprise!" They turned to see a tall, round-faced man with rosy cheeks striding toward them, Ludo Bagman. He stopped in front of Vincent and immediately fixed his gaze on Slughorn. "And this is—" Slughorn extended his hand with a smooth, practiced smile. "Horace Slughorn, pleased to meet you. I'm a retired professor from Hogwarts." "Likewise, Professor Slughorn," Ludo said, enthusiastically shaking his hand. "I'm Ludo Bagman, head of the Department of Magical Games and Sports at the Ministry of Magic, and the person in charge of this Triwizard Tournament." "Oh, you've been invited to watch the tournament, haven't you?" Slughorn nodded. "I'm sure it will be very exciting. You might have heard about the first task. It was absolutely thrilling. The 4 champions each faced a dragon, and Harry Potter even overturned a Welsh green with just his wand." Ludo laughed, delighted with the tale. Slughorn was stunned. A student facing a dragon? The image didn't fit comfortably with Slughorn's worldview. He had certainly heard of the boy who lived, but seeing a student take on a dragon seemed extraordinary. Vincent cleared his throat. Mr. Bagman, are you sure there are no problems with the competition? What's wrong? Ludo asked, puzzled. Vincent organized his thoughts. I mean, Barty Crouch has disappeared, hasn't he? Will that affect the competition? Ludo smiled reassuringly. I understand your concern, Professor Vincent, but there's no need to worry. Recent commotions won't affect the progress of the contest at all. Mr. Crouch and I finalized the competition content and schedule before the tournament began. Now it's only a matter of pre-competition preparations. Then, who decided the tasks? Vincent pressed. Ludo winked mysteriously and twitched a finger by his nose. Well, that's something I can't reveal, Professor Vincent. He lowered his voice and added confidentially, I can guarantee only that the tasks haven't changed since they were first conceived. Vincent nodded, satisfied for the moment. Chapter 358, Arrival. Ludo had other business and didn't linger with Professor Vincent and Slughorn. Slughorn, however, had picked up the key phrase from Vincent's words. Barty Crouch has disappeared? He asked, puzzled. What do you mean? A deranged Death Eater killed him, Vincent said matter-of-factly. Slughorn froze, eyes wide. You're joking, aren't you? Let's just say that, Vincent shrugged. Slughorn's face went pale. This is no laughing matter. Death Eaters? That means he's coming back, doesn't it? You should have been warned, Vincent replied calmly. It isn't far off. Slughorn fell silent. The three of them crossed the foyer and entered the great hall. Slughorn, like someone returning home, drifted straight to the innermost seat at the staff table, a habit from years of dining there, and cheerfully helped himself to a plate of steak, as if the grim news had already slipped from his mind. Vincent was in no hurry. The truth would become clear soon enough. Partway through dinner, Slughorn remembered something. Oh, that's right, he said, wiping his mouth. Dumbledore told me you might need my help. What's going on? Vincent hadn't forgotten his reason for seeking Slughorn. For certain reasons, I need some Felix Felicis, he said bluntly. Slughorn nodded, a knowing look crossing his face. Felix Felicis, he repeated. A touch of luck can be very useful. Good on you for carrying some. He produced a small bottle from inside his robe and set it on the table. The golden liquid inside shimmered in the candlelight. Slughorn's ready supply was unexpected. What do I owe you? Vincent asked directly. Slughorn cut a piece of steak and looked up, mischief in his eyes. Oh, don't be so serious, my boy, he said with a smile. It's only a small bottle. Take it. True enough, while Felix Felicis was precious to most, retirement had given Slughorn the time to brew a few difficult potions for himself. Vincent hesitated. I might need a lot more. A lot more? Slughorn's smile faded. You can't be abusing that potion. Too much Felix Felicis can have serious consequences, worse than you might imagine. Vincent rolled up his sleeve, revealing a dark, locked mark on his forearm. I'm under a curse, he said simply. Judging by it, treating this will take a large quantity of Felix Felicis. Slughorn peered at the mark, pupils narrowing. He studied Vincent's arm for a long moment and then sighed. Very clever. Clearly well-informed, he had already seen the signs. How much do you need? He asked, changing the subject. Vincent chose a comparison everyone could picture. About the size of a large cup of butterbeer, he said calmly. A cup of butterbeer. Slughorn nearly choked. That's almost a pint. I've already brewed some myself, Vincent added, producing an extra-large crystal bottle and setting it on the table. The golden liquid inside sloshed gently, resembling half a cup of tempting pumpkin juice. Slughorn's eyes widened. Merlin's beard? You can brew Felix Felicis? Yes, Vincent answered as if it were no great thing. Slughorn's astonishment was understandable. Only a handful of masters in Britain could produce that potion. He beamed. Remarkable. But if it's this much, I can't give it away. Of course, Vincent said with relief. He took that to mean Slughorn had enough stock to cover the bottle. I can pay double the market price. Slughorn's brows relaxed, though a shrewd gleam remained. No need. Tell you what, I'll lend you the Felix Felicis now, and in 2.5 years you'll give me a fresh batch. Thank you, Professor Slughorn, Vincent said, grateful. That will be enough time. Satisfied, Slughorn stroked his beard, eyes narrowed in pleasure. Done. When I return to my residence, I'll send it over. No need. I can come and collect it myself, Vincent offered. Slughorn winked. Perhaps, though I might be moving in 2 days. Don't be surprised if you can't find me. Vincent understood. He didn't want his residence known. Thank you again. They enjoyed a pleasant conversation after that, and the immediate problem of the curse was largely settled. As they finished dinner, Dumbledore arrived, looking drawn from travel. "Is it resolved, Professor Vincent?" he asked. "Very smoothly," Vincent replied. "Professor Slughorn was most generous." Slughorn glanced at Dumbledore, noting his dusty, tired appearance. "Where have you been, Albus? You invited me, but then vanished." Dumbledore apologized. "There is much to do. Sometimes one person cannot manage it all." McGonagall had thought the same. Slughorn mused aloud. "Because of the Triwizard Tournament?" Dumbledore nodded. "Come to my office. There is plenty of time to catch up." After a quick goodbye to Vincent, Dumbledore and Slughorn left the Great Hall together. Vincent shrugged, returned to his seat, and continued his meal. 360. The Race in the Black Lake. Early the next morning, Hogwarts hummed with the tense excitement of the Triwizard Tournament. By 9:30, most of the school, teachers and pupils alike, had gathered along the shore of the Black Lake. The February wind bit hard. Students hunched in their robes, tucking their chins down against the cold. Diving into that water would be a torment, though for a wizard it was hardly impossible. On the spectator stands by the lake, Vincent sat in the back row. Dumbledore and the judges occupied the seats in front. The champions stood before the judges' table, while Ludo Bagman, from a small wooden stand, announced the rules. Slughorn and Snape were whispering nearby, but far enough away that Vincent couldn't hear them. Ludo flicked a sonorous charm on himself and boomed. "All right, our champions are ready. You have 1 hour to retrieve your task at the bottom of the lake. I will count to 3 and the competition will begin. 3, 2, 1. A whistle sounded. All but Harry moved at once. Cedric and Fleur cast bubblehead charms and paired them with warming charms, simple and efficient, letting them breathe and move freely underwater. Crumb, however, muttered a string of complex incantations. His head began to twist and reshape, his face stretching forward until it resembled a shark's. "That's so cool," someone nearby exclaimed. Crumb heard it, nodded, and without another word, dived into the lake. Cedric and Fleur followed. Harry couldn't transfigure like Crumb. He chose the bubblehead charm. He had other options. That morning, Dobby had appeared with a handful of gillyweed. Gillyweed, a rare magical plant, lets the eater grow gills and webbed hands and feet for a while, fully adapting them to an underwater environment. Harry disliked the sensation. The magic made his body feel as if it were being reshaped like clay, so he had only eaten a little. He flicked his wand. A transparent bubble formed from the tip and expanded to enclose him completely, like an invisible membrane coating his whole body. Professors Flitwick and McGonagall exchanged surprised whispers. Vincent felt the surprise too. It seemed Harry was beginning to experiment with variations on spells instead of rote incantation. Harry bounced twice to test the charm, satisfied it held, and then slipped into the cold water. How would the crowd see the champions underwater? Organizers had thought of that. Ludo tapped a crystal ball on the judge's table with his wand. "To let everyone enjoy the champion's splendid performance, we've prepared a little magic," he announced. The crystal ball flashed, and 4 huge screens of water rose in the center of the lake, like transparent movie screens. Each displayed a clear, real-time view of a champion beneath the surface. When Harry's face filled one of them, the crowd cheered. Ludo grinned smugly. "That crystal ball had cost a pretty galleon," he said later, and he could swear on Barty Crouch's name he hadn't embezzled a single nut. Harry's charm worked perfectly, no leaks, and he felt nothing of the lake's pressure. Visibility was good and the light adequate. He could see clearly as he looked around. The 3 who had gone in before him were already at work somewhere below. The hint from the golden egg had sent him to the bottom of the lake before. He swam with practiced ease toward the merpeople village, where the task's treasure would likely be kept. He wondered what the treasure actually was as he picked his way around jagged rocks. A dense patch of water plants suddenly swayed violently. Instinctively, Harry raised his wand. Several small, green shapes darted out, Grindylows, thin, bumpy-skinned water demons with long, sharp claws and wide, aggressive eyes. Ugly and noisy, they were dangerous to the unwary, but hardly a serious threat to a wizard. "Impedimenta!" Harry shouted. An invisible barrier sprang up between him and the Grindylows. They scraped and shrieked at the shield like wildcats attacking a glass window. Harry smirked, but didn't waste more time on them. He swam on toward the center of the lake. The merpeople's song reached him, raw, untranslated murmish, harsh to human ears. Harry had picked up a little murmish over the past few days, but not enough to make sense of the original lyrics. Still, he was on the right track. Visibility dropped, and two vague figures loomed ahead. Drawing nearer, he saw Fleur being entangled by a tall merperson. Merpeople were intelligent aquatic beings. According to Newt Scamander, those from warmer waters were more beautiful, northern ones less so. The Black Lake merpeople were anything but beautiful. This one, rubbing against Fleur, stammered in broken, halting English. "Oh, beautiful. Miss I bird gist bird." It seemed the merperson had picked up some human words, even given itself a human-style name. Very odd, Harry thought. Fleur didn't answer. Seizing an opening, she slipped past him and swam away.